But I come from coal country, and I know we're officially in Virginia right now, but I wanted to tell a story about more my end. We actually have a farm that straddles the Tennessee-Virginia border. So we have our house in Tennessee, and then you walk about 10 feet off our porch and you're in Virginia. But you're in the southwestern part of Virginia in the mountains. And there are a lot of miners who live there. It's coal country. And for my PhD training, it's in something called performance ethnography. It's one of those wonderful multi-syllabic terms that makes you sound very smart. But what it means is that I interview people, and then I take those stories, and with those people's permission, I retell those stories to wider audiences. And usually I'm seeking out those stories that don't often get heard in the wider public. And so for the past several years, I've been getting to know a community of coal miners in southwestern Virginia, and I'd like to share one of their stories with you today. And you should know that this is a contemporary story. All the things that you'll hear are happening right now. Okay, this isn't just way back when. All of this, it's a contemporary story. And I have the miners' permission to tell the story, and you need to know that all of these events actually did happen to one man named Donzel. Isn't that a great name? Can you say that name with me? Donzel. It's great. All of this happened to one man named Donzel, and I learned Donzel's the one person who I didn't actually interview myself. His story came to me from a mining training video that the Mining Safety and Health Administration did. It's in public domain, and he wanted his story out there in the public. So it all happened to this one man named Donzel, but the person who narrates this story, it's a composite character, a composite narrator that I created based on these 20-some miners who I interviewed myself, and all of them have given their permission for their story to be heard. And the way that this person, this composite character, the way this person tells a story, yeah, I was in the mines. Now, I was just a red hat when this happened. I just started mining. But my friend, Donzel, he'd been in there a little bit longer than me. He was still new, but he kind of took me under his wing. He taught me a thing or two about mining. Now at the time that this happened, we had just blasted and timbered in a new room. Now, timbers are wooden supports you put up to support your roof up above you, 300 feet of mountain up above your head. We just blasted and timbered, and I went in that room before anybody else got in there, and I switched off my cap light. It was so dark. You ain't never seen anything that dark before. It was pitch black. I turned that light back on, and once my eyes adjusted from coming from the dark up into the light, I thought I saw what looked like an outline of ferns all along that wall. Only they couldn't have been ferns, because I seen them little bitty plants out on my mama's front porch, and these things was huge. 16-foot-long arms and leaves this big. Well, I went over to it. I had to see if it was real, and I took out my knife, that butt end of my knife, and I put my hand up there. I tapped that knife up, and a little piece of that fossil come off in my hand. That fossil, millions of years old, I found out. It's dark and hard against that great coal. Well, I could hear the others coming, and I didn't want them to see me so fascinated with this piece of rock, so I unzipped my jacket, and I put that into my jacket, and the others come, and we set to work. And Donzel, he was with them. And Donzel, he run that continuous miner machine. It's a long, low-to-the-ground machine. It's got a rotor on the front of it with carbon steel teeth. And what you do is you run it with a remote. So we turn that remote on, and that rotor, it would start to spinning. And that rotor, as it spun, those carbon steel teeth, they would dig into that face of coal. They'd dig out that coal, and they deposit it onto a belt. And that belt, it run from all the way where we were, 3 miles dug into the mountain. It run 3 miles out to the entrance. And once it got out of that entrance, that coal on that belt, it would tip up on that belt as it arced up into the sky, and then that coal, it would spill off over the tipple and into trucks that were waiting to take that coal off to those plants to be processed into energy so we can get these lights in this room. But in order for that coal to get over to those plants, it has to get into that truck and onto that belt. So men like Donzel are down in there, and men like me were down in there. My job, being new, my job all whole shift was to take a shovel, and the coal that fell off that belt, I put it back on that belt. I done that the whole shift. And you have to understand, this is low coal. This ain't like those high mines up in Pennsylvania. No, you're talking 28 inches to 36-inch high tunnels, no higher than a table. So you're crawling. And I always kept one foot under my backside, or you had to be on your knees all the time. And you say, did you get the head up? No. You worked with your head sideways. And naturally, the top of the roof, it was damp and wet, dusty, and coal would build up on the side of your head or side of it, or water would drip down your ear or down your clothes. And where it was so low, there was no way you could keep your back out of the top of it. All the time where you was a-working and a-moving, the time the shift was over, you was drenched because you got lakes up above you. You got water, all that water dripping down. It's no dry place. Now, and once that shift was over, we was cleaning up in that room, and a few of the boys my age, we were flipping rocks at each other, just horseplay. And one of them, he took aim at Donzel. Flipped a rock over at him, and Donzel, he brushed it off his cap. He said, "Cut that out! Quit it!" He didn't like that horseplay too much. But we kept on and cleaning up. But I looked over at Donzel, and he kept brushing his cap, brushing dust off of it, and I thought I saw this little trickle of dust coming from the ceiling. Only the foreman, he hadn't seen it, and I thought I was just seeing things, so I went on back to working, and then I heard Donzel again. He's brushing his cap, and he said, "Cut that out! Quit it!" And I looked over at him, and there was this rock. It come out of the ceiling, and it plunked down on his cap, and it busted his cap light out, and all the lights went off. The foreman, he grabbed me by the shoulders, and he pulled me and him into the next room. There was this huge boom. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before, and we sat up from where we'd landed. And we saw that whole ceiling had just collapsed in on top of that room. The whole shift. And I was the only one left, me and the foreman. Well, I remembered what Donzel had told me, that them rock falls, that they's deadly. But I couldn't help myself. I just ran over to that pile of rock, and I started pulling them off, hollering, "Donzel! Donzel!" And the foreman, he's a-hollering for helping me, coughing and hacking. That coal dust is getting in my mouth and down my throat. Well, the others come, and we set to work. We started tunneling in, trying to find people. And I remembered that Donzel, he'd been by that continuous miner machine when his cap light had gone out. And so I took a couple of boys. We started tunneling out to where that was, but it took hours. About 10 hours later, that boy down that tunnel, we'd gone in shifts. That boy who was down there, he said he thought he could hear something. It was real weak, but it kind of sounded like breathing. And it was my turn to go in that tunnel. I went on through, and I picked up a rock, and I passed it back. And there he was, Donzel. He had his head pushed up against that miner machine. He found an air pocket in there. That's how he kept alive, but all the rest of him was just covered over in rock. Those arms that was pinned underneath him. And I bent down. I was trying to reach his face, getting down to where he was, and as I got closer, I could see that he had vomited all over himself. And so I cleared that off away from his face, so he could breathe a little bit easier, but with those arms pinned underneath him, all that rock on him, he could just barely suck in the air. Well, we kept trying to take that coal off of him, and we got all of it off, except for one leg. And then I started to see that same little trickle of dust start to come down. And this whole thing was just starting to rib roll back on top of him again. So we got boards. And we covered him over with boards, and we backed out of that tunnel, and me hollering, "We're not leaving you, Donzel, hold on." And then this other huge boom, and that whole thing just came on top of him again. We went back in. We tunneled through, it took another hour, and we got all that rock off and pulled up those boards. We saw that they had saved him from that second fall. So we worked double quick. We got all that off of his leg, and I was tired by that point. I backed out of that tunnel. Another boy, he come in, and he grabbed Donzel by the belt and by the collar, and he just lifted him up out of that dark hole, and we started passing him one man to the next, and he come to me. I grabbed onto him, and as he passed by me, I saw that there wasn't a cut on him, but his clothes were soaked with blood. Where the pressure of being underneath all that rock for 14 hours, it had squeezed the blood out of his pores. Passed him on back, and we kept on going. We got 3 others out that day. But Buzzy and Dan and Luke, they was all crushed. We carried him out in pieces days later. But Donzel lived. He had 70-some injuries. And where those arms had been pinned underneath him, all those hours, 14 hours under that rock, it had cut off the circulation, and they had just rotted out from underneath him. The doctors, they cut off a piece at a time, trying to find something that was living. They left about 6 inches on each side, but he was alive. I went to visit him while he was in the hospital, and then over the next couple of years while he was recuperating at home. And I tell you something, it's true. He and I still go hunting together. That's true. Now I know I'm not much of a hunter, with my leg and my back, but the doctors, they made Donzel some good arms, prosthetic arms with metal hinges and a finger. It's just about right for that trigger. And we sit out on his back porch, and we just wait for them crows to come along. At night of the accident, I went over, I sat down on my bed when I got home. I unzipped my jacket, took out that fossil. I looked at it, I thought about where it had come from. Hole in the earth that's fallen in on itself again, all that coal crushed in with blood and skin where those bodies had stained it. And you look at my knees now. Mine were after so many years of working, I got these little spots on them, black coal spots. You can't wash them out, can't get them out, can't get them out. And the doctors, they pulled me out of the mines a few years back. But I tell you the truth, I would give anything to go back down there again. The friendships that you meet down there making. And I was an archaeologist. Now, given the chance to live over again, I'd go back down every time.